Okay, recording in progress. Thank you so much for recording this, Salvatore. And thank you so much for having me tonight. Audubon Society. We're talking about birds. We're talking about a lot of things tonight. In fact, I am not I'm thrilled to be talking with you all. In fact, tonight I'm in a hotel room in Los Angeles. I'm actually in Hollywood right now. I'm on my own migratory pattern. I'm Gosh, I find myself kind of always on tour. For the past 10 years, I've been writing books about California ecology. And for the past year, since my latest book, The State of Fire: Why California Burns came out, I've been really talking about little else. And so I will be talking a little bit about fire tonight, but in terms of bird conservation, because there's some interesting overlap there. So already I've proposed something that is ecological in nature, not necessarily specific. And there's a taxonomic word, right? Specific as it deals with species. I will be talking about some ethology as species specific ethology, but I'm mostly I'm drawing big broad strokes tonight across trajectories of conservation and ecological philosophy. Most of my presentations these days are somewhere between, like, I don't know, like some kind of like bad stand-up comedy and like a graduate seminar on ecological philosophy. So we're gonna see where this one lands a little bit, but I've prepared a special presentation for the Stanislaus Audubon Society tonight, talking about desert birds in specifically. Now, it's gonna be so. What I want you to do first, if you would, is just sort of like relax into the space and consider for the next half an hour or so how I deputize you now as a philosopher, as someone who can think about their own relationship to the more than human world, as we might call it, to our, how do we best attend to the responsibilities that complement every right we enjoy as Californians and as citizens. And so if you take that license, I would like to even like zoom out more towards some sort of place where we might talk a little bit more abstractly about, how about this, the meaning of birds, or why birds matter, uh, as we consider in this momentous uh, time frame that is the 21st century, the biosphere crisis of bird simplification. I wish to, and that I think is a lot related to the simplification of insect biodiversity across the planet, which is indicative of this larger collapse, this pending perhaps terrible, possibly apocalyptic collapse of these ecological architectures that support every human society across the globe, and since the beginning of time to the end of time. We need to consider the place of birds on an evolutionary timescale and on a societal level too. And it turns out the deserts of California is a wonderful, let's say parameter setting for such a discussion. And so I really wish this presentation then to be as policy oriented as it is poetry oriented. And between these two worlds, the consilience really between the schools of of what should we say, like the physical sciences and the humanities, is where I ultimately draw on my vocation. So uh, here is a photograph of the 6 books that I produced in the past uh, 10 years. The first one was the California Field Atlas, the Field Atlas being a genre of my invention, which is not really about the what of things, right? Which would be like a field guide. What is that bird? Or it's really not even about like the where of things. Like I'm really not concerned about the where of things too much, which is kind of funny and ironic for I think calling itself an atlas. What I really want to describe is the phenomena of ecology across the landscape in terms of the celebration of and the continued case for the conservation of this world-class portfolio of biodiversity that California enjoys. And so that would be like the fundamental thrust of this work. And fortunately for me as an artist and as a writer and as a science communicator and as a policy communicator, I have chosen a subject that is like really sort of infinite in depth. This thing that is California. I mean the 10-second elevator pitch for the first book is something like hundreds of hand painted maps of how nature works around the state in terms of earth, air, fire, and water. And then I moved into the California Lands trilogy, which is the forests, the coasts, and the deserts of California. And most of the drawings and paintings you'll be seeing over the next half an hour are from that third book. And there's an interesting sort of temporal aspect to that California Lands trilogy that sort of makes the meat of this whole California Field Atlas series, which is the forest, which is the evolutionary history of arboreal habitat around the state. And then the coasts of California, which is really a snapshot of the right now, if you will, like how different the coasts were 100, 200 years ago pre-European contact and how different they will be 100 years, 200 years from now. And then finally, the deserts of California, and drawing a very distinct line between increased desertification and increased aridity across the California floristic province, but also drawing that line between what that emergent phenomena is, and what a mature desert ecosystem actually is, this very fragile and resilient thing. And that whole series was bookended by the state of water, which the subtitle of which is understanding California's most precious resource. And we will talk a lot about that theme, what water is, what water means to bird migration, for example. And then finally, my last book, which is The State of Fire, Why California Burns, which makes the case for something like um, something like the reason why California burns is because of decisions that people make. And it's been this way for thousands of years. And making that case for California itself as an ecological configuration of different biomes, ecotypes, habitat systems as being an artifact of human stewardship. And we are indeed seeing that in uh, bird evolution and adaptivity to this day. So I'm going to kind of start tonight as kind of at the end of this argument a little bit, and let me explain what I mean by that. So here's the Stanislaus National Forest. This is a brand new map that's a compilation given to me by the rangers up there uh, of how fire on the land actually has progressed over the past 50 years or so. And you see like up in the upper right of that map, there's less fire than in the lower quadrants of the map, and that just has to do with the elevation on the land. The little purple areas are the prescribed fire, and this map is interesting. I mean, it's interesting to talk about fire in general, especially in terms of it being a bird conservation issue. As perhaps you know, as Audubon people, um, there are many passerine birds, songbirds, many dozens of species of birds that rely on snag forest habitat or post-fire habitat for feeding, mainly for food sources, to such a degree that snag forest habitat is more biodiverse in terms of avian biodiversity than even something like old growth forest. Like the spotted owl, for example, requires snag forest for its hunting grounds. It'll nest in the old growth, but it needs the snag forest to hunt. And now, due to fire exclusion policy across the state over the past 100 years, snag forest, even with catastrophic years like 2020 when 4 million acres went up, even with those kind of years, snag forest habitat is more rare in the state than old growth forest habitat. So the idea there and with these two pictures to the left that I'm going to talk about really quickly is like sort of like where ecology and economy overlap. I'm the pictures on the left there are at this Delta restoration project, right where well, it's at this place called Tide's End, which is really where on the San Francisco Bay, you can see me standing there on this restored habitat. Just a few years ago, that was cow pasture, and now it is restored wetland habitat. You can see Mount Diablo in the background. That's 5,700 acres, and this was the result of an ingenious private public equity interface where Sacramento had been trying with public funds to get this project done for the past 20 years, and they spent $14 billion doing it and was ultimately unsuccessful. A private company called Ecosystem Partners Investments moved in and bought the contract from Sacramento, or they signed a contract with Sacramento rather that the cap that the government would buy from then the project fully delivered. And they were able to do this with $500 million in 5 years. And this is the kind of out of the box thinking towards restoration, towards conservation, towards species remediation that involves private equity, but on a deeper level, it involves local community oriented um, empowerment, especially in the age of, shall I put this gingerly, trying to avoid those very ugly objects in the rhetorical landscape of American politic right now. But it's like given the environment and tone of federal investment in um, projects of this type, returning to regional, local, state economies, especially one as robust as and as strong as California is, might we find examples, precedent for such novel economic solutions to things like bird conservation in California's deserts. And now th- we've got a bunch of interesting things happening in Sacramento right now as far as really exciting policy. And I think one of the topics of conversation that comes up more and more is the 30 by 30 state law, which was just passed into law from graduating from being a governor's executive order towards being uh, a real and funded law towards protecting 30% of California's lands and waters by the year 2030. And I think ecologically, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless we're talking about something like a 50 by 50. And I really warn and criticize Sacramento, the Department of Natural Resources, for ostensibly giving license to trashing the other 70%. The way that the law is set up, the way that land designation as such is qualifying as protected under the 30 by 30 is low resolution at best. You can see in the graphs on the left of this image here that in the lower right there it says desert woodland. You can see that the desert is about 75% protected under the Desert Resource Conservation Energy Plan, DRCEP, which is the law of the desert. Um, and yet that vital 25%, which very well might be under the knife. And what I mean by that is that with the installation of so much thermal solar infrastructure across the desert, we're looking at about 500,000 acres over the next 10 years of installed solar energy infrastructure. And that's those little blue shapes in my hand-drawn map of the desert there on the right. We've got a lot of assumptions on the board that are very tenuous at best to conservation of desert habitat writ large. And I think one of the basic assumptions that we take tend to take for granted is the idea of essential habitat, as if we have as if we can really determine what the lower parameter of that might actually be, what essential habit, assuming that there is a floor, assuming that we haven't even like stepped through that floor, and now we're just headed towards continued simplification and away from diversity. But let's now step away from policy and consider the ancient desert, because I want to talk about a little bit about, well, I'll tell you what, I am working on my seventh book right now, and I'm in contract with Heyday to write three more books. It's the second California Lands trilogy, and I'm diving deeper into this idea of like temporal ecology. And the first book that I'm working on right now is called The Origins of California, and that will be followed by The Cities of California, and that will be followed by The Futures of California. So I'm writing a bunch of other 700 page books. I just as I say, it's depthless. It's like a magic well. It's like the more I drink, the more I find that there is to drink. And so I'm going deeper into how California became California, and what that actually means. And I mean, when you're thinking of birds, birds in the desert, when you're thinking of birds writ large on an evolutionary scale, it's almost as like there's a couple of things that occur to me. It's like when birds or avian dinosaurs were released from their Mesozoic shackles, if you will, at the fifth mass extinction, there was almost like a cheat code for niche resource exploitation that was revealed to the function of I don't terrestrial life, and that is the invention of bird migration. Like there was this whole field of that, certainly this was now the third time in evolutionary history that flight had been invented in sort of convergent evolutionary forms. First the insects, and then the pterosaurs, and then the birds, and the birds then migrated more than any species ever had before or since, and continue to do so. The Arctic tern, as you probably know, is the longest migration in the world from pole to pole every year, 40,000 miles. Like that's like an incredible investment in this whole novel Cenozoic landscape type, right? So I find that fascinating and beautiful to think of the poetry of Gaia inventing the birds, if you will. Gaia, there seems like the dream of Gaia has always been. Furthermore, I think it's really important to consider the diversity of all life. In the sense, it's like species evolve and speciate in reaction to landform physiography and how climate informs ecological conditions and migratory patterns over hundreds of millennia. Right. So this is and always tending towards more complexity, more species, more diversity. There are more taxa, there are more species on the planet now than there ever has been. And there's no reason to think why that should end too with as many as the consensus seems to hold that we're in the midst of a sixth world mass extinction. And and even despite that, 10 million years from now, say, like when by way of its own steady conveyance, the San Andreas Fault rips the peninsula of Baja off and forms the island of Baja, uh, going north on its regular trajectory over the next 10 million years, where Los Angeles becomes a suburb of the archipelago of San Francisco, right? And like California's completely shifted then, and then given like theories of island biogeography, like what will be migratory patterns of birds then? Like it will be more diverse. Like I wonder if like even like placental mammals will even like rule the day in that far future. Like the dream of Gaia continues despite all of our fret and worry about the 21st century. And I think, clearly this all gets to like a really basic ethical point about the study of ecology, which is there are no oughts or shoulds in ecology. It's all about studying emergent forms of habitat structure, emergent forms of ecosystem architecture. I think that another really fascinating thought is how since like say the Pleistocene uh when before the last glacial maximum, before the Holocene, before 18,000 years ago or so, California and the Mojave and the Sonora and the Great Basin Desert were all much more temperate environments. And I wonder, I mean, a a incredible time for birds. We have the largest North American bird in the fossil record. Uh, uh, Evidence for it in Anza-Borrego Desert State Park. The wind bird god, or god bird as they say, and that in at 25-foot wingspan, right? This is the this is where there was a zenith of sorts. And yet when we're looking at bird forms to this day, certainly they are relics in so many ways to a bygone era of when lakes were filled across um, across the Mojave, the high desert, the low desert. We'll get into the desert in a moment when we'll begin to define these terms. But I think that I have the very visceral sense. I think with the California condor as a backpacker around California. I learned to backpack in like the 80s, and I had just thought that nature was something that I had missed. Backpacking in Big Sur, for example, in coastal California, there were no condors, there were no otters, there were no elk, there were no, uh, white-tailed American kites, there were no peregrine falcons. And now, conservation, due to the conservation movement, due to good science, good to love, good to societies and organizations like your own, all of those species that I just mentioned have rebounded in amazing ways, but I tell you, there's nothing like a wild condor flying over, checking you out, only 20 feet above your head to make you, here we have a bird the size of a car, uh, really sizing you up. That always a moment of elation, tinged with a little bit of terror. That's for sure. Um, so let's go into a little bit of what I'm talking about with the deserts here in California. Uh, So really what we have here on a conservation front is a crisis of what can be called anthropogenic landscape alteration. Or even you could just take the alteration out of it. It's just anthropogenic landscapes. With the amount of deformation that we've done to the hydrology of the California desert over the past 120 years, it's amazing that birds have adapted so quickly and so well. So if you look at that map to the left, I just sort of like peppered that map with some blue circles and some red circles. And the blue circles are really like this necklace of like major habitat hubs. From the top, we've got Tule Lake going down to Lake Tahoe and the wetlands of the Truckee River and Hope Valley, for example. And then you go down to Mono Lake, and then you go down to the Owens Valley, which was once the Owens Lake, or at least the southernmost end of the Owens Valley there. And you go down to the Salton Sea, which is, of course, an accident, 120-year-old accident, going down to the Laguna Salada and the estuary of the Colorado River into the Gulf of California. Is that what we still call it? I think we do, or the Sea of Cortez, or whatever it's called these days. But really, we've got three, maybe four deserts in California between the Great Basin, which forms many different ecotones out in Death Valley National Park, down across the high desert, which is the Mojave Desert, which is California's own private desert and the driest desert in the driest desert in North America, and then down to the Sonoran Desert, which often is called the Colorado Desert in California, as it is largely absent of the saguaro cactus, which is this indicator species of sort of geographically where you are. Um, Although many biogeographers will quibble with even the identification of the land taxonomic uh, identifier that is the Colorado Desert. Uh, so here, gosh, I love to paint birds. I love to paint birds. Let me see. I just wrote something about how I love to paint birds. If you'll indulge me, I'm going to see if I can find it real fast. I love painting birds. Here we go. I think that if you counted the hundreds of paintings in my books of California nature, a disproportionate amount of them would be birds. The shape of the wings seems calligraphic, and the line of their form lends itself well to my formalist style of representation, individuated and clear against a contrasting background. As I do this more and more, I get lost in the creative fog between taking in the world and giving it back, between walking, reading, painting, and writing, the four activities I spend my days doing, and find them to be rather all equivocal. When I walk through the forest, I am reading the unfolding of its leafy curtains. When I am traversing miles of printed ink on the page, I am participating in a grand yet subtle expedition. When I am painting, even as I write from left to right, I wonder at the beauty of calligraphy, and then writing to make the words themselves luminous in their two-dimensional physical reality. That kind of that that atonement that I feel with the with what does a bird represent? A bird represent that bird song strikes us something strikes us it strikes so deeply into the core of the human spirit. When we hear the bird song, we can't help but think we're safe because we have these watchers, these avian watchers who are looking out for predators. I mean, it's something positively Neolithic, and and that kind of reciprocity I feel giving back, telling this story of ecology on the landscape is really where it is at for me. And then now telling this story of conservation, so here we have this idea of like this anthropogenic landscape again. I mean, the Salton Sea is just so fascinating. I mean, I'm sorry, Mono Lake is just so fascinating. I'm going to talk about Mono Lake. I'm going to talk about Salton Sea. I'm going to talk about the Colorado River just in the few minutes that I have left here because I just want to point out some of these conditions for these incredibly large bird migrations and how they're being supported or not supported by human conservatorship, uh, stewardship, traditional ecological knowledge, tribal ecological knowledge. There, we've got Mono Lake is a very rather simple food web. I mean, it's it's remarkably toxic. It's like, the chemosynthetic bacteria that are processing that don't use that in the middle of the lake. They don't actually need sunlight. What the majority of brine shrimp food, which all of these migratory birds feast upon, are uh, produced by metabolized arsenic in these plankton organisms, platonic organisms the chemosynthesis is the process by which the arsenic is then transformed into sugars, ostensibly carbohydrates, such that the brine ship then feed the bird populations. Now, the it turns out that the level of the lake is really determinative of the salinity of the water, and the salinity of the water, being the chemistry of the water, uh, really informs the biodiversity of the lake in general. But there's also a physiographic element too. When Mulholland in the 20s and 30s, when Los Angeles tried their best to extend a straw up through because Mono Lake is a closed basin system. There was there you know they send getting the water out of the eastern Sierra Nevada that fills Mono Lake, that keeps Mono Lake alive. Taking that water out was starving Mono Lake of fresh water, and you had Pauha Island there actually at one point almost being connected to the mainland, letting canids, for example, foxes and coyotes, come across and destroying breeding colonies of nesting ground birds. And it was real time witnessing of ecological collapse of this ancient system, of this ancient ecological food web. And it's really still just this precarious concept between the wants, needs, and thirsts of this uh, uh, absurd megalopolis that I'm actually sitting in right now. Why do you build a megalopolis 100 miles away from the nearest fresh water source? It will forever be the best real estate scam in the history of California, as far as I'm concerned. But silliness aside, the water needs of Los Angeles um, may in fact, uh, regardless of uh, what actually plays out in the 21st century in water policy between the Mono Lake headwaters and Los Angeles, may actually be completely upended by uh, increasing temperatures, increasing aridity, precipitation manipulations by climate breakdown because of anthropogenic global warming. We've got the Salton Sea. Oh, the Salton Sea and the Coachella Valley. I put a couple of interesting, beautiful birds in this slide that aren't birds that you normally associate with Salton Sea. I mean, Salton Sea could on any given day in August, you might see 250,000 birds across 300 species on the Salton Sea. Like, the diversity of birds that are attracted to this place. And now Salton Sea, oh, check this out. I was thinking about this today. It's like Salton Sea is now like the world's biggest bird bath. I mean, that's really what it is. It's like it's only filling. There's only water in there because of anthropic reasons, and there will only continue to be water because of anthropic reasons, at least in this current climate phase. The Kaweah Sea, which is the ancient Salton seabed, rises and lowers with geologic ages as it is informed by a Colorado River that moves back and forth. But these days, all the birds that live there because or migrate through rather because when we're talking about desert birds, we're talking about migration. And migration is there are many birds that live in that live in the desert year round, but the vast majority of them migrate through. And there's many different types of migrations. There's partial migrations and then complete migrations, meaning a complete migration might be the entire species migrates. There's different ways that desert birds or birds across the Pacific flyway actually migrate. Many of them come from feeding in northern climes to nesting in southern climes in the winter, and while others, including like the elf owl, for example, we saw the elf owl in one of those endangered slides earlier. The elf owl is one of the only migrating owls that migrates in the summertime to the high desert from Mexico, where well, yeah, right now, what do we have in June? We've got a couple of things going on. June, we've got well, like the shorebirds are headed south, flycatchers are headed north. So there's a lot of different timing. Like I was saying before, it's like all habitat all habitat is extremely temporal, right? If we're not talking about seasonal temporality, we're talking about something like anthropogenic temporality. Like the Salton Sea very well might not be a habitat for birds in 10 years, 15 years, 100 years. It's hard to say. Right now we've got the Salton Sea Conservation Habitat Project, which is a really successful kind of thing. So far it is. Well, we've got a lot of eyes on it. My goodness, the Utah's really looking at it. The Great Salt Lake is doing the same thing the Salton Sea is doing. It's basically eutrophying, it's drying up, as the evaporative demand on the habitat areas is so great. And yet now over the past couple of years, 4,000 acres of wetland have been restored, basically making channels from the New River, which is an artificial river as well, and into diverting it away from agricultural projects because agricultural projects have been so technologically upgraded across the Imperial Valley south of the Salton Sea. And and what we have now, well, and there's and it looked like that's going to grow to like 30,000 acres over the next 10 years. So there's like a really ambitious, really good effort to make the Salton Sea viable for birds, shorebirds, migrating birds, ducks. Oh, hey, Swainson's hawk, right? If you guys ever make it down to Anza Borrego State Park and from like March 15th, like April 15th, it's like the biggest like uh migration moment for the Swainson's hawk in any sort of local emergent phenomena, and the whole town of Borrego Springs gets all excited about Swainson's hawks there. So that's something to see. We've got the common, not so common. The purwill there, the only bird in the world that hibernates um, in the Coachella Valley. Uh, let's see here. Okay, we can go on to talk about the Colorado River here. The Colorado River, America's hardest working river. It really is. What is it like? It's something like well, what is it? It's like 50 million people rely on the Colorado River for drinking water. Uh, we've got the Binational River Agreement. Okay, so that happened in the year 2000. So finally, we're letting some water into the wetlands south of the Colorado River. If you don't know, the Colorado River has not made it to the ocean in 100 years. And now it is. And with spring pulses of 100,000 acre feet, which amounts to 1% of the water and the land area covered in pre-contact wetlands. And yet, even with that, we're seeing huge, even with only it being 1%, we're seeing huge rebounds in populations of migrating birds, waterfowl, and songbirds across estuary and riparian and lagoon habitats that are showing this really remarkable bounce back. I think that that just gets to like, gosh, why is it? Just give it half a chance. Just give it half a chance. Desert birds. We love our birds. I don't know if you have all encountered this book yet, but Amy Tan just wrote the Backyard Bird Chronicles, and I resisted it for a little bit. I got to be completely honest here. It's like, okay, so John Muir Laws, who wrote like you probably all have a John Muir Laws book in your library right now. He is like he shaped so much of my career. He is the man for nature journaling. He is the man for so much education about what it is to be a naturalist in this state. And his field guides are actually published by my publisher, Heyday Books, which is also, well, Heyday Books. And now I invented the field atlas to sort of have some like shelf place differentiation, really, from his books. Like I knew I could never compete with Jack Laws, and and why would I ever want to? I am such a fan of his. I want to do something completely different. And now we have Amy Tan's book, and Amy Tan was trained by John Muir Laws to draw birds, and she evoked inside of herself this inspiration, this love for birds that is so infectious that it's number one right now on the New York Times bestseller list. Like, we love birds. The love of birds is perhaps, I mean, we could certainly talk about the we could certainly talk about the ecological services that birds provide, these gifts of um, whether it be insectivory, the eating of insects, pest insects, the pollination of plants. We could go on and on about what they do, their utilitarian value, and yet there is something far deeper, this beauty that is communicated, that on a spiritual level unites us in this post-political space. And my goodness, if we don't need that right now. Uh, the subtitle to my second book is The State of Water was Understanding California's Most Precious Resource. The implication of it being the physical substance of water itself, when in fact, having toured this book for so long, I realized that the most precious resource that we have is the ability to trust each other with a story at all. And I really think that that level of trust and that level of story that birds even provide. You see that I haven't made any arguments tonight, but I do think that there is something about telling of a better story that might change minds towards conservation, towards reciprocation, towards love, towards something ultimately that resembles sustainability. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up this little presentation on the ecology of desert birds, and I hold your attention as sacred. So thank you so much for it.